requirements that are triggered in the 2022 and 2023 contract year agreement are serious. Kate Ben Ezra has attempted to curtail the speech of a victim of domestic violence. On October 10th of 2023, she attempted to seize the contents of the victim's cell phone, which is referred to as compelled encryption. It is illegal. She did not have a warrant. It was done at a gospel choir performance. On the 18th of August, 2023, her staff failed to protect a victim in violation of a protective order that is currently in place when a volunteer who was openly disparaging the Catholic Church was shooting pictures of the victim's license plate and threatening to engage in technology-facilitated abuse. This rises to the level of a crime. That particular type of harassment is extremely dangerous. And instead of calling for assistance from the police, when the volunteer's words rose to threats, she retaliated against the victim. On the 19th of October in 2023, the victim was trying to safely park, and in yet another mid-level violent provocation, Kate called the police on the victim, attempting to trespass the victim. No crime was committed. Nothing rose to the level of a need for a police response. The victim is not a criminal. The victim does not have a criminal record. And yet, someone who is asking you for thousands and thousands of dollars right now in federal funds weaponized the Amherst Police Department to frighten, intimidate, and harass her. Thank God the Amherst Police Department did not and had the sanity and clarity to protect her and realize what was going on. But it gets a lot worse. On November 27th of 2023, 2 weeks after the victim had met with the board of directors regarding the misconduct of Kate Ben Ezra, she removed the victim mid-shop from the federally funded food pantry, denying her access to food in yet another instance of intimidation, harassment, and retaliation. On December 23rd, the victim received an email from the board president of the Amherst Survival Center containing the personally identifiable information of yet a separate complainant who has also reported egregious misconduct by Kate Ben Ezra. The board president, who was an employee of the town at the time, then instructed the victim to destroy the evidence. So now you have a criminal. It is so bad. Okay. Since multiple other individuals have come forward with complaints against Kate Ben Ezra, it is the responsibility of the town to ensure that victims are protected with respect to their physical safety and otherwise from discrimination and harassment. Denying a victim of violence at 114% of the federal poverty level access to the food pantry is in violation of federal regulations. It's in violation of the terms of the current community development block grant. It is in violation of the restraining order that is in place to protect the victim, which has the address of the survival center on it. So now before you is a decision. There are a lot of moving parts. There are a lot of bodies right now involved in this investigation, external to the municipality. You are going to make a decision about whether or not to recommend to the full body $62,398 to the Survival Center with its current leadership in place. You are complicit in this intentional repeated harassment and infliction of duress and distress and discrimination if you do so, right? Thank you for letting me speak. This has been really difficult. There's a lot of problems happening right now. God, I hope you can help solve them. Thank you.
We appreciate your comments. Thank you. Does anyone else want to provide public comment? Okay, I think in that case, I will close the public comment period and we'll move on to reviewing the budget.
I'm sorry, Bob, a hand went up at the last second.
Oh,
I'm not sure if you want to take one more comment.
sure.
Hello, I'm Amherst. I am a senior at Amherst Regional High School, and I am from Sunrise, Amherst. And we are, while we're really glad that the 6% for the schools has been appropriated, we are very concerned about using the ARPA money to fund this, as it is another Band-Aid solution, and we understand that we're in a big crunch and that we don't have a lot of options, but doing this is really only putting it off for another year. And it's something that I've heard a lot of people say, like a lot of counselors, a lot of finance committee people, like we don't want to just like fix this for one more year and put off all this harm until next year. And then that's exactly what the manager proposed, essentially, is like this money is going to run out. And so I would encourage you all to look into other options, like maybe cutting from other departments. It is our belief as an organization that the police is still very overfunded, and that is a place where money could be cut. And we also believe that the library could take some money out of the capital budget and reallocate it to the operating budget, because this is a issue that I've seen my entire high school career every year. And it's time for some sort of bigger systemic change to our budget. Otherwise, it's just going to keep happening. So I want you guys to think creatively and think big in this budget cycle, because I think it's a big turning point. And yeah, that's all I'll say. Thanks for listening.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Is there anyone else who wishes to provide a public comment? Okay, I don't see anyone, so I will close the public comment period and we'll move on to review of the budget. I think it's probably beyond the ability of our time to go through the final report sort of page by page. But does anyone have any specific comments on the report itself? And I mean, obviously there's certain areas like the motions that are still a little bit squishy, but the rest of it should be fairly straightforward. So does anyone have any specific comments that they wish to make on the report itself?
Bob, I emailed, mentioned this before the meeting started, but I emailed the committee and counselors with an update that the town manager has proposed a revised regional school budget. Would it be okay if the town manager can speak to that before you get into the report?
Sure.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you. So as we discussed, in accordance with the vote of the Finance Committee, we have submitted a revised budget that includes the 2% additional funds for the regional school district, with the funding source for the additional funds coming from ARPA funds. And we have prepared motions for the council to consider, or orders for the council to consider, that includes all the actions that the council should, we're hoping that the Finance Committee would recommend to the full council.
Okay, do you have a specific ARPA project in mind, or is this sort of?
No, so so all the ARPA projects need to be the funds that under ARPA that are not contracted by the end of December 31 will be reallocated into free cash. So we will contract as much as we possibly can, but we don't anticipate that all the projects that we've identified back in whenever we presented that will really come to fruition. So then it will be available to the council to appropriate as you see fit, or to approve appropriation as you see fit.
Okay. Athena, did you want to add something?
Just one other quick comment. I mentioned to committee members before the meeting began that there's also a document in your packet with some legal advice about adopting the revised regional school budget. The long and short of it is that the Finance Committee can make a recommendation on that revised budget and the council can vote it. So the process doesn't restart at the beginning with the council required to make a referral and a new public hearing and so forth.
Okay, thank you. Kathy?
Paul, I actually I have a question on, I mean, I think the route you took for ARPA, you could have gone to free cash. So I just have a quick question on why ARPA. And then I also heard you say for the first time, and I'm glad you said it publicly, that if we can put the ARPA money into free cash, because the last presentation we had is it was all going to go to roads, so that there'll be still some opportunity. So my only question about the choice of ARPA is among the when we were originally told on what ARPA could be used from, we could use it in an operating budget if there had been lost revenue in some way. It wasn't clear to me we could just use it in an operating budget. And clearly ESSER has been different because the schools have been using it that way. So I just wanted to make sure there are no strings on ARPA that says this doesn't quite fit ARPA. Because there's a large pot of unused ARPA, not designating a specific source sits fine with me. To me, it would be cleaner to say free cash if we think the money's going to go into ARPA. So I'm just looking for your reasoning.
Sure. So that your guidelines tell me not to use free cash. Under the financial guidelines established by the town council, you say do not use free cash as a funding source. So in trying to achieve the goal that the Finance Committee voted and to meet the request of the regional school district, ARPA seemed to be the only avenue available to us without cutting other budgets. And I think Sandy can speak to whether it can be used if you want to, Sandy. I think we're pretty clear that these funds can be allocated this way.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if you'd like me to speak, I'd be glad to.
Sure. Go ahead.
Well, the light keeps changing here, so I'm really going to try to illuminate this question. So under ARPA regulations, every city or town can declare up to $10 million worth of revenue replacement. You don't have to specify what revenue was lost, but they will just assume that everybody had $10 million worth of lost revenue because of COVID, and you can use up to that amount as revenue replacement, which is what designating ARPA now would do. I would also just say that the final ARPA spending numbers will change. The final revenue numbers for the town are going to change eventually. So it may be that you don't have to rely on this amount of ARPA eventually. But at this point, on June 4th at 2:23, this is a snapshot that we have. Before we set the tax rate in the fall, some things may need to be adjusted, but that's the best guess we have as of today. So I hope that answers the question.
It does. And, I'll let Mandy speak, but Paul, whatever day it was, I guess it was Friday, we've been told free cash was an option. So what you're saying is it goes against our guidelines. So to the extent we will rewrite that section of there's a section on the regional schools. So we can just add what.
Yeah, just to respond. So your question to me, Kathy, was why did you choose ARPA?
Yeah, and I understand.
I didn't say I did. Free cash is certainly an option. That's not the option I'm putting on the table.
Okay.
And if I could just add 2 cents to that, I think as a general matter, you don't want to use free cash. Again, it's within the guidelines. It also, I think, would set a bad precedent for budget deliberations going forward. If every time there was some push on something, the first thing you did was go to free cash. I mean, it sets a bad example for any number of whether whether it's school budgets or collective bargaining issues and so forth and so on. So Amherst has had a policy of not using free cash, and so I think it's a wise thing to be consistent with that policy.
No, thank you. That's helpful because we can put a sentence or two in the section on whatever X page it's on. Thank you.
Councilor Haneke?
Thank you. So we had given you two options and you chose ARPA, and I think that's, given what I'm hearing, even our motion to increase the regional school budget is in violation of our own financial guidelines in a sense. And so your choice in those options is to minimize the violations of the financial guidelines, essentially, to just the increase, not how you're paying for the increase too. So you're trying not to pile on those sort of overriding our standards towns guidelines. So I appreciate that. My question with the ARPA funds is, I think a week ago you had indicated that it might be coming from reducing the additional solar that might go to the Fort River project. So I'd like you to speak to a little bit more in your thinking on how the ARPA funds might get used in terms of projects. Will projects that you foresee happening or that had been told to us be decreased in scope, or do you foresee enough of those projects not using all of the money despite the scope that you've gone, or not being able to use it because you couldn't contract that scope, say, by December? I know we had concerns about the Bangs Center on that sort of ability to contract that scope, such that whatever this 355 isn't going to, is it, I guess, your position at this point that you believe that using ARPA funds in this manner will be able to be done in a way that doesn't necessarily compromise any of the projects that you had previously indicated you were going to use ARPA funds for?
Clearly, you can't, as Athena has said, you can't spend the same dollar twice, right? So this money being spent on this can't be spent on something else. At this point, with the variability in the projects that we've identified, there's going to be change. We don't know what the numbers are for the Banks Community Center. We don't. The $1 million is a number for the solar. We don't have an estimate, a true estimate on the solar. It could be more, it could be less. We don't know. Depends on the scale that we do. So what I'm saying is that, as Sandy said, as of today, we're prioritizing funding for the regional school district with ARPA funds over the other projects. But I'm not going to say how, at this point, how we're going to be allocating the rest of those funds, other than that we've identified the major categories of how we want to allocate the funds, meaning the senior center, the Banks Community Center, the solar at the Fort River School, and roads.
Andy?
Okay, got it finally. Guess I'm going to go back to the history of the development of our financial policies for a moment, and some of what we did with creating a policy that we wouldn't recommend using reserves of any kind for ongoing programs, and what because there was an exception that was built in, and we didn't put it into writing in the policy because we felt it was so rare, and I can only recall it being used once. But we always felt that decision makers at that point, it was what the Finance Committee would recommend to town meeting and what town meeting would do. Now it's a little bit different, but the one exception that existed was that if it was a one-time use and it was clearly not going to recur in another year, and it was a bridge to something else, that and there were two ways that we saw a bridge to something else happening. And I could go digging back for the original memo that where this was stated, but essentially what it was is that if we saw that a grant was coming and that an amount of money would be needed to help start up the grant program because of whatever reasons, just to get it started, but that it was not going to require ongoing appropriations to continue the program, or there was other kinds of funding that was coming in, that we would consider it. And the other is if we thought that it was going to invest in something that was going to, in the end, lead to long-term savings, so that there was a benefit in that way. And that was actually the only time I recall it being used, that we actually allowed for reserves to be used for closeout expenses to shut down Marks Meadows School, because we concluded with the school committee at the time that there would be long-term savings that would occur year for year by having one fewer elementary schools, and that the costs to close down the school and transfer operations to Wildwood, which was absorbing the Marks Meadows School into it, was a worthwhile expenditure. So that was the one expense. So I throw this out for a couple of reasons. One is to sort of reinforce the point that guidelines are guidelines, but they can always be modified if there's a reason to do so. And that depending upon what agreements are reached with the other towns and schools as far as long-term planning, that this could be, if it was going to be a bridge, it would have to be a bridge to reduction. And that reduction would have to be measured in percent of future increases. But I wanted to at least put that history out there and say that there is a little bit of precedent, and I will offer what it is.
Thanks, Andy. Bernie?
Yeah, two questions. One, the money that's going to be added, the 2% that's going to be added to the school budget, represents what percentage of available ARPA funds? And by available, I mean funds that haven't been contracted for.
I don't know the number off the top of my head.
Okay, so but is it? I mean, is it a significant percentage?
No, it's not
10%,
no.
5%.
I just don't know the number.
Okay,
It's not significant though compared to it's.
Okay,
Yeah.
So we're, in other words, it's highly likely that when we go and or actually when Paul, you go and have firm versions of the plans and the bidding is done, we get accurate estimates, we're going to have some tailings in that ARPA. And the other question I have is this ARPA, unspent ARPA money goes to free cash, that'll be available in FY26, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so it's this upcoming fiscal year, it won't be treated as free cash. Okay, great, thank you.
Councilor Walker?
Thank you, Bob. So what I think I'm understanding is that we have the option to commit to using ARPA funds, but not knowing exactly which pool, if you will, of ARPA funds it will come from. And I think considering the fact that we have so much left, that would be I would be okay with that option, but I would like some assurance that it wouldn't affect the amount that we have available to put towards solar for the high school. Because I know we don't have full estimates, but like you said, Paul, like what if it comes above what we were already planning to appropriate, or whatever it comes in at? I would just hope that we are going to continue to put forward the same amount in that pool if that is possible with this accommodation.
Yeah, so again, we don't have firm estimates, even what we for the $1 million for the solar on the Fort River School, which is where it would go. And so I can't give you an assurance. But again, what I'm saying is that the things that I identified previously for ARPA continues to be the 3 priority areas for it.
Kathy?
Yeah, I'll just, in terms of it's the parking lot at Fort River, but so everyone understands, Fort River project already has more than enough solar in it for the Fort River School. So this solar would provide an offset to utility costs somewhere else. And when I did a quick look at kilowatt hours used in the Crocker Farm Elementary School, for example, it probably would come close to offsetting the electricity costs there. So the million-ish would be, the designers haven't designed it yet, but they'll be able to give us a more specific on how much kWhs we get. And the concept was it would be on its own meter. So it wouldn't be metered with the Fort River School. So the town, then it would be on a town meter. So we could do sort of what you've been doing, Paul, with the landfill solar, that you've been allocating out who gets the credits for that. And this, they would design it as long as they get the money by the end of this year. So they had a timeline. They can design it and it would be installed. It's the second phase because it's the north end of the parking lot. So this would clearly be spent by the end of, the end date because of the school schedule. So I just want to say that million, we don't have exactly how many kilowatt hours that buys right now, but we have for $1 million, we will get more.
Yeah.
So
just to be clear, it's on the town. It's not the regional school district.
Right, exactly.
It's
and
a
that's
separate,
what I was trying to say. This is
it's a
a
separate
town,
governmental entity, so it stays on the town school side of things.
and that's what I said. It's on its own meter and it's a
Yeah.
town meter to decide where that energy goes. I mean, should any major benefactor want to give us more money, there's still room on the parking lot to add more. So this won't fully cover the parking lot. So the advantage is there's a new parking lot there. So when you're installing it, you can plan for the canopies. I just wanted to make it clear that it's not, the number's a clear number, but it's not clear exactly what it buys yet, other than solar. Sorry.
Okay, are there any other comments? So maybe we can focus on the report now. As I said earlier, does anyone have any broad comments or specific comments on the report? Councilor Haneke?
So yeah, some of my changes that I had sent in on Saturday, I think didn't get incorporated into this, but I can resend them to you, Bob. I'm concerned, and it's a minor concern about the executive summary in terms of just clarity on what we're recommending. When we say something like to 6%, I think it needs a clause that says from what, or the extra 2%, not like it's 2% of the budget, right? So I've done a couple of suggestions on sort of clarifying when we're talking about percentages, what we're actually talking about. That's just minor. I had sent in a new paragraph under the overall budget that talked about, and I think it made it a little bit into the executive summary, but a new paragraph that talked about sort of overall the staffing situation that the town departments are having, and that new paragraph didn't make it in. It can probably be rewritten better than I wrote it, I will say, but just a little bit more emphasis on when we're talking about the whole budget, that the difficulties in staffing that are contributing to potentially higher turnover than typical, but also difficulty in hiring because of the amount of work we're trying to have people do as things do. Just just another mention of that beyond in the executive summary I'd like to see. I'll go back to capital in a second. And then in the regional school section, again, another mention as to the reasons we are requesting an increase in the regional or recommending an increase in the regional school budget above financial guidelines. It's mentioned in like a sentence here or there in the executive summary, but the regional school section almost glosses over why we would be requesting or recommending that increase above financial guidelines. So I would like a section filled out more on the committee's reasons for making that recommendation. And maybe each of us probably has slightly different reasons, so maybe we actually have to voice them today to get it into the report. But I think the public should have that there should be a focus on why we're making that recommendation contrary to our financial guidelines, frankly. Let me see. A couple of minor things that I will send you a marked up version of mine that are more just grammatical stuff, or some stuff again for that clarity of discussion when we're talking about percentages or increases and things like that. In general, those were my two big comments. Oh, capital. I wanted to, when I wrote up the capital improvement plan, I added a paragraph regarding the Jones Library project debt service that's in the capital improvement program, that 1.122 million, that indicated we hadn't heard from the town manager potential uses or plans for that or his thoughts on that. And so I want to give him an opportunity to better fully answer some of our questions regarding the use of that money or what happens to it or how it could be used in the future, given that many of us believe, even if the project goes forward, and I'm one that hopes it does, that whole money probably won't be spent in this fiscal year. And then I'd like the opportunity, if that happens, to rewrite that paragraph. So I guess that's a request to the manager to expound a little bit more on the use of that money or any recommendations or anything like that. And then I can get a different sort of draft of that portion of it to you, Bob.
Paul, did you want to respond?
Sure, and Sandy can weigh in on this as well. So yeah, we talked about that. I think what our feeling is that those funds allocated to library repayments are going to be needed one way or the other for the library, either for repairs that have to be, again, pretty much in this fiscal year, or whatever need is made. If it isn't used for a bond repayment, then it is going to be, assuming we don't move forward on this project, which is again not the assumption I'm working on, it may not. We will need it for some other purpose. So rather than adjust it now when we don't know the answer, we can come back in the fall and review when free cash is certified, and we can adjust some of these decisions at that point. I think it's premature to make that judgment now. Sandy, did you want to add anything to that?
I agree with what Paul said. We have a best guess now. I would leave the money in capital because I think it's a dangerous thing to take money away from capital to go to operating and so forth. And so I would say once you know for sure what you're going to do with the library, and you'll know that in the fall, you can make adjustments.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Haneke, let me apologize for not getting your comments fully incorporated. It was just oversight and just drinking from a fire hose. So it wasn't.
I completely understand. So I'm not going to take the committee's time to go through them because many of them are very minor. So.
Okay. Kathy.
So Mandy, you're always such a close reader. Please do send them. Bob will share them with me because I'm finding some typos in sentences. Whenever I write sentences quickly, they have typos, but I think we said 2 to 6. 2 to 6%, but anyway, send those in. So I have a question on two questions on the capital improvement. So I think we just got the sentence we can add to what Mandy has already written. Can we, I think the answer is yes. So it says Jones Library debt service. If it ends up that we aren't fully going out, and that was estimated to be the full 12 months, assuming that we had financed the 15.8. If it doesn't end up being debt service, but it ends up being repairs, is that considered just repurposing that line? So, Sonia used to say it's kind of in the same bucket. So it's a question rather than, because I could see how, particularly because the trustees have a commitment to some repair money, that we could combine it. So that's question number one. And I was, as Sandy knows, I was chair of JCPC, so I hesitated to raise any issues, having written the JCPC report. But one of the things we did notice, and I'd like to add this sentence, but I want to make sure it works well with people. And Sandy picked up on it right away. We have a very large expense item in this year's budget. It's the new radio system for police and fire. And it wasn't on the horizon a year ago. And so Sandy had to do a fair amount of work to find out it had been in the works. So my request, and I wanted to add a sentence, that I think our capital plan, I was urging earlier on that it be balanced over the 5-year period, but I feel like it'd be reasonably accurate for large projects over a 2-year period. If we have something in the pipeline, it shouldn't bounce on when we didn't even know about it. So I'd like to just add a sentence toward that effect. So I'm not questioning the expenditure, but if you look at last year's JCPC report, this wasn't in the wings for FY25. And now we have some things in the wings that weren't on the wings at all, period, weren't in the 5-year plan. So I know how hard it was this year because of staffing issues to get people to do much more than 1 year worth. And Bob made a comment that anything more than 1 year is probably not super real, but things that are in the $1 million category, we ought to know there's some sleepers coming, just and add a sentence. So I just like to add a sentence that to the extent we know that there's something brewing, we flag it in the plan when it's brought to JCPC so that we don't get these big shifts. And I'll stop there because Sandy actually had pushed it off at one point to find out really whether it was a fully formed plan, because he noticed the same thing. It had not really been on the list initially. Yeah. So it's a comment that I'll draft a sentence and it will be more a recommendation for the future. That's it.
Thank you. Andy?
Well, I'm going to first start by thanking Bob and Kathy for providing this draft report. Having been one who's been in the role of having to sort of make sure that a report got written in prior years, I want to say that they did a great job. It's a lot of work. I respect the amount of work that went into it. It's evident when reading it. And there was a lot of creativity of looking at different approaches, which is the advantage of having the change in chair, is that somebody's looking at it from a different angle. And Kathy provided the continuity. And as she always does, she's great about saying, hey, somewhere we got to summarize it so that people don't have to read 15, 20 pages, but can get the pieces without having to read 15, 20 pages. And she did her usual part. So I want to thank both of you. The second, but getting on to the things that were talked about, I think that the question that was raised about the fact that staffing problems exist across all departments or many departments, and that this is a very difficult environment for hiring, and is actually pretty well stated in the report. And I think that it was in the executive summary, I believe, so that it really is solidly there. And I appreciate that it was suggested and included, because if I was going to look for commonalities of things from all of the different departments that came to meet with us, certainly staffing concerns and the need for hiring and the fear of losing people because of the need to fill the positions, the expense that we go through to train people and then lose them after training them. I mean, there are a whole lot of things that we heard from many department heads. That it was not just the single piece, but there was a whole litany of the investment in the people that we then losing the people, the cost and time of replacing them, the difficulty of replacing them. There is that whole sequence. And so I think that there's no way that it can be overstated, because it just was the one thing we heard across. And if anything, we might want to take one last look to make sure that we have that whole piece in there. Another thing that cut across many departments is something that was also in the capital budget and has already been discussed today, and that's the importance of the communications system that connects dispatch to all of the departments within public safety that rely on dispatch. And so I think that was sort of one other overarching piece. And the reason I bring it up is that while it was a capital item, it was one thing that we did actually ask most of the public safety heads to at least comment on it a little bit. And all of them said something, and I think it's worth putting in somewhere that we did raise this with the heads of public safety departments, and every one of them who spoke to it reinforced the importance of this equipment and the need to make sure that our communications capacity within public safety and across departments is strong, and that this is a necessary capital expense to get there. So I would make sure that we've adequately covered that. And I'm going to, when I look at it one more time, I will look at it. Another piece that, or two pieces actually that I think tied together, is I really appreciated the section on future years that was included in the draft, and the notation in the explanation of as difficult as this year is, that it's just a lead into where we're going. And I think that that was an extraordinarily important thing to say. If anything, I would tie that back to the regional school discussion, if we, because I think that as we get into the regional school discussion, that is part of what we need to be thinking about, is the fact that we've been pressed to do the 6% this year to save loss of teaching staff, but that we may have just been kicking the can down the road for one more year, and that we have extreme concerns about this community being able to continue to support schools in the future at the level of annual increase that they seem to have built into their expectations. And I would like to make sure that when we do write it up, we not just come up with our reasons, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes, I gather, about why we were making the decision we're making for this year, but to tie it back into the future years. And I guess my last comment is that we just got the orders, and I think it's we all need to take the time to make sure that we look at how the actual wording of the orders ties back to what we say about the orders in the in the report itself. And of course, we have to be voting in a way that ties it all together anyway. But I don't think that's the issue. I just think that we may need to make sure. So I will give it a one last thorough read, get my comments off to Bob and Kathy as quickly as I can. And that's a summation of my major comments.
Thank you. Kathy?
Yeah, I have a very minor one, and I agree that we should get to the orders and anything substantive. In the library write-up, there's a sentence that says that the library climate goals would be achieved in the renovation. And then it goes on to say they'd anticipated $35,000 savings in FY25 because of those goals. That's not accurate. The $35,000 in FY25 is because they anticipated being closed. That, you know, the new green building was never going to be operating. So I just wanted to change it to, with the expected closure, the library anticipated a $35,000. Their budget is going to have to be rethought, Paul. I know they know that, because they're not close, you know, they may have more than enough money, but they anticipated some utility savings, and they're going to be in the same building. So it's clear. I just a simple wording, because it wasn't a reduction because of climate, of investing in better climate. Long term, we'll get that, but that wasn't why 25 is down. So that was a minor one, and I completely agree. And I also saw one typo on the dollars, but I completely agree that we need to add a few sentences on why we went from 4 to 6, added 2%. And we need to tie the wording in, because Paul has given us some pretty complex wording. I must say, I looked quickly at the regional school operating budget and the assessment method. I mean, it's complex in that we ought to understand what's in those financial orders, because we then have to capture it in some way in text. So that's my only comment. I had 2 minutes to look at it before the meeting, but it jumped out at me that they're written clearly, but there's a major message in the way they're written.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to look at them, so I think Athena, when times comes, if you can post them on the
So
screen, that'd be
my
great.
suggestion is, well, my procedural suggestion is well, Mandy wanted some words on why we're going from 4 to 6, and I can add some words on that. But I think going through the school-related regional would be useful, because we never discussed the assessment method. We just did a placeholder on it. So it might be good to just focus on those. The others, financial orders, are more straightforward. And just so everyone knows, the way Paul did it quite artfully, he pulled everything but regional out into the rest, so that we could focus on a specific extra regional wording on the 2 to 6, or the 4 to 6. So that would be my suggestion. Mandy's hand is up. Trying to focus on the orders, those 2 orders, the 2 related to the regional schools.
Okay. Councilor Haneke?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts. So I'll go quickly so that it's out there. My reasons for recommending the increase are mainly the transitional nature for the last 15 months of the superintendency leadership, having an interim superintendent that then precluded essentially, who was also serving as finance director, basically precluded doing what we had wanted them to do last year, is one of the big ones. And then the argument that a new superintendent shouldn't come in as high of a crisis as they would have at 4%, did in the end, speak to me. But I had 2 comments, or 2 thoughts. The first one was, maybe we can get the votes on all the financial orders except 1, 2, and actually 1 and 2 out of the way. 1 and 2 are the assessment method and the regional school budget, and we can just get the rest of those votes out of the way. be done with them on the recommendation. And then the second one was and this goes to the assessment method and even the appropriation and approval order for the budget for the region. Does the committee want to vote to recommend the council send a letter or some sort of something to the regional school committee to accompany our votes on the budget that indicate potentially, and I'm speaking out loud here on some of my thoughts, that increase that does not, that 6% is not doable every year. that 355 is not worked into our budget. So it is one-time funds only and cannot be assumed to get another 3.5% or whatever percentage on top of that next year. And that we aren't sure, again, we'd have to talk about something like this, but something about the non standard nature of having the functional areas at different increases, percentage increases against our guidelines. And those are just things I think might go in a letter, but do we want to recommend the council send an accompanying letter to the school committee with thoughts regarding assessment method, the increase they've asked for, even though they are getting it this year, clarity on where it's coming from and whether or not we believe it will be available next year at all, to help them as they begin their discussions.
Good question. Paul, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, so I just want to make sure in terms of the council's discussion that the orders are one thing and then your discussion in your report is something different. So when you talk about the orders, that's something that our finance staff have crafted. And I think we want to be very careful about, I don't think you want to put any editorial language into those orders. I think it's just the orders are factual actions by the council that will be reviewed by the Department of Revenue and by our auditor. Everybody looks at these things. So I think that you want to be very careful about fiddling with the orders. I think our finance staff have done a pretty good job at trying to, we struggled a lot with the language with the ARPA funds, quite honestly, and that was how to finesse that, because it's not an appropriation, but it is, we needed to show the full appropriation of the for the regional school district. So I think they worked on that pretty carefully. So I just encourage you, if you're really going to try to make changes to the orders, that we have a pretty coherent discussion with our comptroller and our former comptroller and Sandy and everybody too. Thank you.
Okay, Bernie.
Yeah, I was just going to remark that it's not our intention to, at least not my intention, to amend or alter any of the orders. The orders are the orders. I think it would be helpful for the regional school committee to understand that beyond the dry legal language of those orders, there's some concerns and thoughts. And not to change the orders, but to add some commentary that to the school committee that will explain that what's going on here, and will reinforce the notion that we're not comfortable, at least I personally am not comfortable with prescribing an increase year after year after year.
Okay. Council Haneke?
Can I start making motions?
Sure.
So we can like move them. So I'm going to start with, I'm going to skip the regional ones for now. And then I figure out through the other ones.
Can I just request that Athena puts them up on the screen?
Yeah.
I'm putting them up now.
I'm going to start with the 404A.
Okay.
Just so
I think you should be looking at an 05. I mean, an FY25.
No, 2504A. I said I was going to skip the regional ones to start with.
Oh, skip the regional. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I thought you said
the
start
motions,
with the
I'm going
regional.
to start with the non-regional ones first.
Yeah,
So I was going to start with
FY25 04A.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I misheard you.
No problem. So the
Nope, I'm
motion
still-
is to
Whoops.
recommend that the council approve appropriation and transfer order FY25-04A an order appropriating the town of Amherst operating budget for fiscal year 2025.
Shane seconds.
Any discussion? Okay, Andy?
Yeah, the one thing that I just wanted to say and to follow up on what Paul said, when I mentioned orders, what I was referring to is that we need to look, now that we have the orders, at the language in the report to make sure that there's consistency in the report and the orders. But I was in no way suggesting that that the orders themselves should be changed, and I have no particular comments on the order on the table. I think it's one to support.
Yeah, we will. I will get, once we get through this. I will change the report to reflect the newer set of our orders. Kathy?
So not surprisingly, I cross-checked the numbers that are in this order, and they match what we saw in the budget book. So just in case anyone else wants to go back and do that. You know, as I said, the first thing I needed to do is realize the schools are, the elementary school is in it, but not the other, but it does match what we've been looking at. So that's my only comment. And as you said, Bob, we can say that this is in fact an order that it's the operating budget for everything but a few things. So yeah, in the wording, we won't change the wording of the order.
No. Okay. I think we're ready to vote then. I vote yay. Kathy?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Councilor Haneke?
Aye.
Councilor Walker?
Yes.
Bernie?
Support.
Okay, it's unanimous. It's 4A.
Which one would you like me to bring up next? Capital improvement?
Yeah, so I think that one, let me find my numbers, is 05A.
Yeah.
So I'll move that to recommend that the council approve appropriation and transfer order FY25-05A, an order appropriating funds for a portion of the town of Amherst capital improvement program equipment, buildings and facilities for fiscal year 2025.
No, second.
Okay, and Steinberg seconds. Okay.
Any discussion?
Nope.
Alicia, I can't, Councilor Walker and Bernie, I can't see your pictures very easily. So if you.
No hands up right now, Bob.
Okay. All right, let's go through then. I vote aye on this. Councilor Haneke?
Aye.
Kathy?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Councilor Walker?
Yes.
Bernie?
I support.
All right, that's another.
So
Okay.
the
Next,
is
06A.
Move to recommend that the council approve appropriation and transfer order FY25-06A, an order approving and authorizing borrowing to fund capital projects bond authorization, for the police facility chiller replacement and public safety radio system replacement.
Shane second.
Any discussion?
Kathy second.
Andy, okay, any discussion? Sorry. All right, let's move to a vote. Councilor Walker?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Councilor Haneke?
Aye.
Kathy?
Yes.
Bernie?
Support.
Okay, another unanimous.
So Athena, I have a question on 2503A, which is
Okay.
the capital authorization for the regional school approval. It said no vote required. Does Finance Committee still recommend a vote?
Yeah, so this is one where years ago, we had just, if the council doesn't take an action, then it's a pocket approval. And we had adopted the practice in the last year or so of asking Finance Committee to make a recommendation and the council taking an affirmative action rather than just allowing it to be approved kind of in the background. So yes, I would ask that Finance Committee include that in their report.
So I'll make a motion on that one then.
You said you're starting with 03A?
03A.
Okay.
Move to recommend that the council approval order FY 25-03A, an order approving the Amherst Pelham Regional School District debt authorization for fiscal year 2025.
Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, seconded by Andy. Any discussion? All right, then let's move to a vote. I vote yes. Councilor Haneke,
Aye.
Kathy,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Councilor Walker,
Yes.
Bernie.
Support.
Okay, it's unanimous.
$2502, the budget before the assessment method. So I move to recommend that the council approval, appropriation, and transfer order FY 25-02, an order approving the Amherst Pelham Regional School District FY 2025 budget and appropriating the town of Amherst share of the budget assessment.
Shane seconds.
Any discussion?
Yeah, I should raise my hand, sorry.
Go ahead.
This is the one where Mandy's suggestion of there be a side letter once this goes through the council. The way this is worded, it makes it clear that we're transferring in to the operating budget for schools, our share, 355 from a one-time source. So if you just read this, you might not understand that. And it's clear that and the other thing is it is in effect going from 4 to 6%. It did increase it. So I'm not saying anything more. I'm going to vote for this, but we're going to need to make it clear that's what this order does.
Okay. Councilor Haneke?
I agree. I think after we finish this in the next order, there might be a motion to recommend the council write a letter to the school committee. But yeah, it uses one-time funds. I don't like using one-time funds. I would in some sense prefer not to do this. I'm going to support it. But I worry that it will give a false sense of less need to do what needs to be done over the course of the next year. And I really do think we need to send a message or send a clear sort of sending a message sounds so wrong, but let the regional school committee know that these funds are not available next year. And cannot be counted on to be available from the town next year. That the town is starting at 18,482, 898 next year, not the 18,7 or 988, whatever it would be. And find a way to do that in a letter that puts it, because the appropriation and transfer orders are just cut and dry. But I do think we need to be clearer to the regional school what our concerns are for next year and what is or is not a potential possibility regarding the use of the the plan for next year's budget, FY26 budget, based on these appropriation and transfer orders and approvals. But it's not this motion, so.
Okay, Paul?
Just a note for Athena to change the date, the year on the council vote to 2024.
Got it. Thank you.
Andy?
Yeah, I mean, we're getting a little bit into our reasoning, and I think that's an important discussion to have. And, reluctantly, I come to this as being necessary. And I recognize that this has been a difficult year for the schools, that because of the changeover in the superintendent with an interim superintendent in between, and the large changeover in the school committee, that this was a difficult year for them, and that there are a lot of new school committee members who really had not been through the process before, and therefore didn't have the background of how the process worked. I know that there was some people who feel that it would have been helpful, and certainly would have been helpful, had the school committee focused on the effects of a 4% increase earlier than they did. I think that they're all valid criticisms, but it is what it is, and I think that it is in large part because of the amount of changeover in the schools. I think that to create a crisis in the schools by so severely underfunding their expectations that they apparently were really not prepared to implement would have been devastating for the schools. And for that reason, it seemed appropriate. But I think it's important, as we recognize all of that history, that we also come back to the points that we've already talked about in this meeting about moving forward, that this is not something that is a sustainable level of year-to-year increase, and that whether it be a smaller increase in the next year or what the base would have been if it had been 4%, you come out the same way, that looking at the future funding for municipalities, that it's just not sustainable to continue to operate schools in this fashion. And I think that we also need to be supportive of efforts, and I know that Paul has been thinking about this, but supportive of efforts to communicate with other towns as to what their expectations and capacities are going forward, and that we make sure that we've tied in to other communities, because I don't think that we are alone in recognizing the problems, continuing this into future years if there isn't some significant adjustment. And the last thing that I would put forward is that how the education program would have to be adjusted is not the purview of town meetings, it's not purview of the council in Amherst, but the amount we can afford to appropriate is very much of our responsibility for both the short and the long term, to make sure that we are balancing out the capacities of our communities, including the capacity of homeowners to pay taxes, to support budgets, since that's the largest source of income for all communities, and that we're communicating that, but not making suggestions on how this could be accommodated. That we realize it's a big challenge, and we look forward to supporting this school committee if it takes on as it takes on this responsibility, something of that nature.
Okay, thanks. Bernie?
Yeah, I've got my rationale for doing this is the other three towns went ahead and jumped into it and did a fairly simplistic and traditional kind of fix to this, which is we'll throw some more money at it. And if we didn't go along, I think this would be too disruptive at this point. In listening to the discussions, I'm certain that not all of the members of the school committee, maybe a majority, don't quite understand the seriousness of this, and they have proposed have tossed out some very simplistic ways of solving the issue. I think that will hopefully change over time. I think if we're going to continue to insist that the Commonwealth provide us more state aid, we have to stop bailing ourselves out. Because every time we go back to the State House and say, we need more education money for schools, they'll say, well, didn't you just increase the budget? Didn't you find the money? I think we have to be careful of that. And I'm also concerned that the expectation level that's being placed on a new superintendent who is coming in cold to a system unknown to her is going to be put in a situation where she could very easily end up being forced into failure by too much expectation, too many problems that demand immediate solutions, and too much expectations upon her skill level. I don't see that she has some good staff people that she can rely on. But I'm really concerned that when we keep saying, oh, well, superintendent will fix all this. No, she won't. And we should acknowledge that. So I think we're going to find ourselves next year going back and forth again as to whether or not we're going to bump up the school budget a little bit or a lot, or finally forcing a revision in how services are delivered. It's not going to be an easy year for the schools, and it won't be an easy year for anybody who has to make decisions about this. So thank you.
Yeah, I just want to comment that, I mean, I share everyone's concerns about having to go this way on the budget, but I agree that we're looking at a situation where the alternative is just not tenable. And I had a conversation with Andy a few weeks ago, and we talked about, we have reserves for rainy days, right? Well, it's raining. And we have to do something. And so this is what we can do. I agree wholeheartedly with Councilor Haneke's suggestion that the council write a letter explaining that we can't do this every year. And I mean, we may want to note in that letter that in the Four Towns meeting, the regional committee, school committee, stated that they understood this was a problem and give them a year to work on it. So they kind of committed to working the problem. Whether they can or not is another story, but they did. So I think we should hold them to that promise, not promise, but hold them to that aspiration. Anyway, that's it. Andy?
Yeah, I remember the conversation we had about rainy day funds. I don't think it's raining. This was not unexpected, and I look back in my history with the town, and I can tell you 2007 and 2008, it was raining. And I know the difference. And the difference is that we had an operating budget for the year 2007 and we kept getting notifications that the governor had cut funding from the appropriation for the year we were in because of the plummeting revenue in the state budget. And we had to make cuts in the year we were in, as well as in the year ahead in 2008. So, having lived through that on the finance committee, I would define that as raining. I think that it's important that we remind people that when we talk about holding reserves, that that first core tier of reserves is for a pure crisis, that this is not a pure crisis because this was known, anticipated. We had talked with Superintendent Morris about it. At the time, he was committed to working on it, but then other things overtook his time, his life, and then he left. And so it wasn't unanticipated. I think that raining is when it's unanticipated.
Okay, fair enough. Any other discussion? Okay, I'll move to vote. So we have a motion. I vote yes. Bernie,
Support.
Andy,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
Councilor Haneke,
Aye.
Councilor Walker.
Yes.
Okay, I think it's unanimous again. So there's
I'll make the next one. I want to say, I want to thank, before I make this one, I want to thank Paul for working with the finance committee on the one we just recommended, such that we didn't need to use chapter 44, section 32. So I want to acknowledge that he could have not worked with us, and I thank him for working with us to modify that order that we probably could not have done on our own. So the next motion is to recommend that the council approval order FY 2501, an order approving the Amherst Pelham Regional School District assessment method for fiscal year 2025.
I'll second, but I also have a question.
Go ahead, Kathy.
And this is wording, Paul, and I'm not trying to change the wording. Mandy quickly put for FY25 in what she read, but that's not exactly the way it reads. And what you can see is we are only approving it for FY25, underneath it. So Mandy, you put, assessment method for FY, but it actually says for fiscal year 2025 only. So I'm just, it's clear to me what this says, but is it clear to everyone else when they read it? Mandy, you just stuck some words in because it did kind of.
It didn't really say it in the title, and I felt like
it didn't say it in the title exactly. So it was
put it in there despite the title.
Yeah, so she kind of plunked it in because it needed to be in that. It's the bold line sentence I'm looking at, not the text underneath it. Yeah. So it's a question of you, Paul and Sandy. I mean, do we need to say assessment method for FY25 in the beginning, the top line?
I think that is, you don't need to say it because that's what this whole thing is. You always are just.
Okay.
And I agree, if you want to comment on this is a one-time thing, whatever, that can be part of your narrative report, but it's not part of your
Okay.
So what I see it reading, it says for fiscal year 25 only. I mean, I think you can just say for fiscal year 25, or I don't know how they've read in the past, but the only is it doesn't really mean anything.
And I just noticed those quotation marks at the beginning of for fiscal, but then it never closes it. So
It's
maybe
down here.
It's way down there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is how it's been worded in the past. It's always for fiscal year such and such only, because
Okay.
it's an amendment to the regional agreement. And that's why it's quoted in, because it's amending the regional agreement. It's not just approving the assessment method.
Okay. It shows you that I haven't read it carefully in the past. So
I'm
thank
sorry.
you.
I didn't mean to stop sharing. I meant to
No,
put my
no,
hand
thank
down.
you.
Sorry.
Thank you. That answers all of my questions.
Okay.
Councilor Haneke?
Yeah, my comments go more towards a potential communication with the regional school committee than this appropriation and approval order particularly, but I've always had issue with the guardrails to begin with. But 6% is not something that is sustainable long-term at all. There was concerns that the 4% wasn't sustainable to begin with when they were instituted, but I think we need to communicate in this potential letter that may get recommended in a potential next motion, that at a minimum, the guardrail percentage is not sustainable for our town. I was concerned this year that other towns indicated that, oh, if they hit the guardrail, why isn't Amherst giving to the guardrail too? That didn't appear to me to have regional school committee members really understanding what an assessment method is. There's calculations and formulas, and those formulas are actually determining anew every year different contributions amounts based on the total assessment to the 4 towns, and that these guardrails are saying those new calculations should not increase any one town's contribution more than X over the prior year's contribution. But it did not seem to me that all school committee members really understood what was going on behind all of this. But I think we need to communicate to the school committee that it's not sustainable.
Andy?
Yeah, I mean, this is always a difficult issue because having lived through many years of the assessment method, it's such a complicated statutory piece that, and there's such a history of how our 4 communities have worked together to come up each year with an acceptable solution, and the resolution that we finally reached, which includes the guardrails for a specific reason, that we're delving into a history that I can guarantee that most members of this new school committee who have never lived the experience don't know as well as many of the rest of us don't know. If we didn't approve this, or if other towns didn't approve this, and then one of 2 things is going to happen, and we don't. I think that neither one of this is desirable for Amherst, and I don't think it's desirable for the region, because either it causes the budget to fail, which is the opinion that we have received from the interim superintendent, Dr. Slaughter, has said that it's his understanding that if we fail to achieve an assessment method that's proposed by the school committee, that the entire budget fails. And of course, we just did something to avoid that. But I've never been quite understanding of why Dr. Slaughter says that, because when you read the statute, what the statute says is that if all communities don't agree on an alternative method, that then the statutory method that is built into Mass General Law as the default methodology is the method used. And I think that the default methodology creates a lot greater risks for the community and would probably be much worse for us in Amherst than the use of the 5-year averaging that is built into what is currently the agreement, and the guardrail was put in there as an extra protection for towns that would have a particularly difficult increase year for year. And when we said we need a 6% increase for this year, we almost had to go to the 6% guardrail increase in order to make it work. It wouldn't have worked if we had just stayed with what was in prior place. So you know, we could go on for many more hours than it's worth about the history of the assessment method and how it's evolved over time and why it is where it is. But I think that for the reasons that I've stated, we really have no choice.
Any other discussion? Okay, we have a motion that's seconded. Let's vote. I vote aye. Councilor Haneke?
Aye.
Kathy?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Councilor Walker?
Yes.
Bernie?
Support.
Okay, it passes unanimously. All right. Councilor Haneke?
So I want to make one more motion, but and then I'll explain sort of some thinking behind it and that it might not be the end of it. But I want to make a motion to recommend that the council send a letter to the regional school committee regarding the FY25 budget and the FY26 budget process. I'm going to stop there as the motion.
Is there a second?
I second, depending on the content.
So I am trying to make it, and this is where I want to explain it. I'm making it general so that that motion would make it into this report, knowing that we don't have a letter yet. I believe the budget is set to be voted on the 17th of June, maybe the 24th. We have a couple of finance committee meetings between now and then, but we have to get this report out. So I'm curious whether the committee would sort of support such a motion to get it into this report, with then something that says, we'll draft a letter to present to the council by the time June 24 rolls around. And I'm happy to try and draft that letter, but I don't want to get into, given the time we have now, I've taken notes on what people have said they thought might need to go into a letter. I'm happy to draft it for future review of the finance committee to sort of expand on this motion with an actual recommended letter maybe. But I don't want to take the time in today's meeting, given what else we have to cover, to go through and truly decide what all needs to go in it. So I thought this might be the best compromise as to getting something into the report while still leaving the options of working on this later.
Athena, did you have a comment?
Oh, I'm sorry. There was an instance before where the finance committee recommended a letter and then nobody brought forward a letter, and Mandy's already spoken to that, so I'm good. Thanks.
Okay. I agree. I agree with Mandy. I think that we can agree to recommend that the council write a letter or send a letter, and we can then draft it if the council agrees to send it. So, Kathy?
I totally agree, and I just drafted a really sloppy sentence that the Finance Committee discussed the importance of the council sending a letter to the Regional School Committee highlighting issues of concern. We endorse the concept and plan to bring this to the council at a later date. So just, that. So I just plunked some track edits into the regional school section while we're sitting here. But I do agree, and we've been focusing on the regional school because the elementary school came in at 4%, but they only did it because they had ESSER. So they similarly, not because they needed more this year, but next year, unless something changes, they won't be able to adhere to guidelines. So I'm not trying to distort the letter. The letter needs to focus on regional. We've done a one-time transition money, but elementary schools are not out of the woods either.
Andy?
Yeah, on what Kathy just said, I just wanted to point out that ESSER was a known issue a year ago when we talked to Dr. Morris and had the idea that something had to be done. It would be worth mentioning ESSER in the known sunset of ESSER funding and the choices that were made on how to use ESSER funds, and the consequence of those choices are things that we could include in the letter, because I think it's very much of our recognition of the problem. My other suggestion is, and why I originally raised my hand, is that I would suggest we not just recommend in the report that the council send a letter, but we make it clear that it is the intention of the Finance Committee to provide such a letter for council consideration. So I think that should be explained.
I think those are the words that I just wrote. So you can read them, but I absolutely, it's not like someone should write it. We'll draft a letter and bring it. Yeah. So I see Alicia's hand is up.
Yeah. Councilor Walker?
Thank you. So I'm okay with sending a letter to the regional school committee. I would just hope, and I know all of us who are on this committee right now have sort of shared our feelings about this being a one-time thing and not wanting to set a precedent for the future. But I also do want to recognize that there may be a different finance committee next year. Or next term, and that they might make a different decision. So I also don't want this to be a letter that makes it seem like this is a binding decision, but that this is the conversation that we had as a finance committee right now. And for this decision, this was our thinking. So I hope that we can just be clear with the language on that also.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So do we need to vote on Mandy's motion?
Yes, we do. So is there any other discussion? Okay, I vote aye. Kathy?
Yes.
Mandy, or Councilor Haneke?
Aye.
Andy?
Yes.
Alicia, or Councilor Walker?
Yes.
Bernie?
Yes.
Thanks, unanimous. Sorry, I'm getting tired.
Can't imagine why, Bob.
It's been a kind of a short night. Okay, so we do need to also have I'll move that we accept the Finance Committee report assuming that all the changes that people want to make will be incorporated, and that we send it to the committee or to the council on June 6th, no later than June 6th. So I'll move.
And Bob, do you want to give everyone a deadline for whatever edits they want to send in?
Yeah, if you can get them to me by, late afternoon tomorrow, I should be able to incorporate everything in time to get it in by the 6th.
So I second that motion.
You second it. Any discussion? Okay, let's vote. Councilor Walker,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Councilor Haneke,
Aye.
Kathy,
Yes.
Bernie,
Support.
and I'm a yes. So we have unanimous acceptance. Well, thank you all. It's been quite a month, but I think we've done a good job of going through the budget, and I think we have a good report. And obviously, it can be improved with the edits that people need to want to make. But I think it's a good report. So let's try to get through some of the other stuff. I saw Guilford and Amy have been very patiently waiting for this. Why don't we try to knock off the water and sewer rates? So Guilford and Amy, do you want to have any comments you want to make to start?
Can I quickly ask if there are any questions about the optional tax exemptions? I can ask our assessor to come in. We didn't ask her to attend this meeting, but if anybody has questions about the assessment method, I can bring her in.
Yeah,
I don't have any questions, and I'm a
Okay.
yes. I'm a yes on it, not that we're voting.
Yeah,
Okay.
this just
Okay.
so everyone knows, this is something that we do routinely every year, and it's basically people who are deserving of a personal exemptions from their taxes, and we want to make their lives a little bit better than they are. So
Sorry, I didn't want to jump the line. I just wanted to be able
no,
to give her a
that's
heads
okay.
up if we wanted her to come in. Thank you.
Okay. So Guilford or Amy, do you want to talk about the sewer rates, water and sewer rates? No.
You can go, Amy. You like it so much. No? You have the memo for the sewer rates and the water rates.
Yes.
We're going up to 525 in water and 585 in sewer. That's based on what we have going on now. You've been getting a lot of emails from certain employees saying there are issues at the wastewater plant, and we do know there are issues at the wastewater plant. So at some point, the sewer rate will need to go up as we start identifying the projects we want to move forward with. It's the same as what we did last year with projects for the Centennial Water Treatment Plant. So there is going to be some changes in the sewer rate probably in the future years. So if you have any questions, let me know.
Councilor Haneke?
Yeah, a couple of questions. Sorry that they're going to jump between water and sewer a couple times, but some of them apply to both. The memo on the last page has some projected sewer rates. Are you saying that those rates might be too low right now, given some of the needs of the town? 605 in FY26, 610 in FY27, and 620 in FY28. And can you talk about whether those projections, including the water projections beyond Centennial, or not Centennial, beyond the sewer plant, are sufficient to maintain and improve our systems, particularly the pipes underground that you discussed last week that you're starting to see failures on? Are these projections too low to